Oh yeah, everyone hates Nvidia apparently.
F you, Nvidea.
How does a company fall so far? And how does a company lose sight of its audience? We've never seen something like that before.
I promise I'll talk about AI.
So this was their recent conference over at Computex, a big trade show. And in this specific presentation, he talked about gaming for about, I don't know, 2 minutes or so. And maybe about a minute of it was actually about the new graphics card coming out. Like the dislike ratio on this video, they're bad. And also at their CES.
It's not that bad. But the problem here is AI will come to a halt. At a certain point, you reach a point where you have to create completely new technology. And that will cost a lot of money and time. And then you have to ask, what else are you doing? If Nvidia completely, stops caring about gamers, the moment problems with AI come up, like, AI at the moment is a giant bubble. And Nvidia is right in the middle of, well, not maybe not in the middle, but they are in the bubble of AI. And the bubble will pop at a certain point. And if all their ships are in the AI bubble, worst case, it tanks their company. Best case, they limp for a while. But that's of course only my opinion, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. And if they, don't care about the gamers anymore, they will leave. They are already leaving. AMD is getting more and more market share when it comes to graphics cards. And Intel is now also on the graphics market, and they also getting more and more shares. So Nvidia is actually slowly but surely shrinking. I mean, they are still the number one by far when it comes to graphics cards, but you know, everything takes time, and losing your entire market share would take time. But believe me, when they get to down to 60% market share, they will notice, and they will like, oh, what's going on here? Well, you didn't care about your customers and making valuable products. That's why they left to AMD and Intel, which do make, well, at least products as good as you, but cheaper. In a lot of cases. That's the thing. In a lot of cases, not all of cases, but in a lot of cases. And yeah, that's what's going on. And of course, the current generation of Nvidia graphics chips are not that great, it seems, or at least not for the prices they want.
Presentation, which is specifically the Consumer Electronics Show in 2025 here. So this wasn't even that long ago. They disabled dislikes or likes from people. You can't even comment on these type of videos.
Oh.
So like obviously Nvidia knows that a lot of people aren't going to respond very well to their stuff. It's like, oh, these are just people disliking the videos from Nvidia. Like people just don't like the marketing. What are reviewers saying? What are YouTubers saying? That kind of stuff. Huh.
Oh, they hate
So
it.
that doesn't look that positive. That doesn't look positive. That doesn't look positive. Well, that's kind of negative. Daniel Owen's also posting stuff. These are kind of negative. Jay posted stuff. I don't know, but Nvidia sank to a new low. Nvidia, why are you the way that you are? If you thought Nvidia couldn't get any more scummy, guess again. Nvidia tried to stop us from talking about this graphics card, and now he understands why. The 5080 is
Oh,
actually an
Jesus.
RTX 5070, so that doesn't really look great either. 5070 Ti, oh man. Hardware Unboxed kind of going in. 5060 Ti, 8GB, instantly obsolete. Nvidia screws gamers. 8GB
Instantly obsolete? Oh, Jesus.
dead and buried. Nvidia bribes reviewers to 5060. Wow. Nvidia confused of manipulating gamers nexus our thoughts. 5060 review, Nvidia didn't want you to see this. Nvidia damaging PC gaming. Has Nvidia blacklisted us again? Nvidia didn't want to make the RTX 5070 Ti. 5070 equals 4090? Yeah, Gamers Nexus goes in. Even from Paul's hardware here, he is also going in on Nvidia. This doesn't really look that good. It doesn't look like a lot of people are really liking Nvidia at the moment.
At the moment, that's kind of brewing up for the past, I don't know, 2 years. And that's also why AMD is getting more and more market share. And Intel, just like I said before. And yeah, if this continues, the thing is, gamers are gamers. And the more hardcore a gamer is, the more they are on the internet and looking into things. And if they all decide, you know what, I don't buy Nvidia anymore, there are two other manufacturers of graphics chips. Why don't I give them a shot? Then all of a sudden the panic is there.
Which hasn't always been the case. This has been a slow decline for Nvidia. Like their brand reputation as a gaming company has changed quite a bit. Because as you guys know, Nvidia was pretty much, I'm not sure if they were exactly the inventor of the GPU, but they're pretty damn close to
No.
the inventor, the original GPU. Back in like the 90s, that's when GPUs started to come around. These render graphics on your computer, which means it's pretty much core to any gaming experience.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't. My first Nvidia graphics card was a TNT2 Pro back in the very late 90s or very early 2000s. I'm not sure. Before that, I had an ATI Rage something graphics card. For the ones who don't know, ATI was also one of the very early graphics chip manufacturers. That was bought by AMD in the 2000s, when I remember correctly. And also back in the day, 3DFX was big. Then they kind of collapsed and were bought by Nvidia. And that's where a lot of their tech that they still use is coming from. The more you know. I was there back then when the original scripts were written.
You could ever have. How has Nvidia ended up in this situation where basically like any presentation they do, people are very unhappy, and you can't see it here, but there actually was a live chat. I remember watching this live. People were so negative about this, but now they've hidden the chat replay for their new type of presentations. But where has this decline began? Has this always been a root thing for Nvidia? Well, just to let you know, I'm like relatively young. I'm 23. I'm talking about it from my perspective. So you might be able to see some different perspectives. You might have some more. So leave them in the comments below if you can see some more.
Everything I just talked about happened before he was born.
Points as things have led to this. But one of the big things that I remember back in like 2017 when the GTX 1080 Ti came out, obviously legendary graphics card.
Wow, yeah, the 1080 Ti, even just a 1080, Jesus Christ, that thing was a monster. That thing was a monster. And the problem back then was there was the big cryptocurrency mining frenzy, and graphics cards were so expensive and so rare. Oh, you couldn't get anything, and couldn't get anything for a reasonable price. That was really
An
horrible.
awesome graphics card that everybody has really enjoyed that card. This was the announcement of it. This is freaking 8 years ago. You can see young Luke from Linus Tech Tips, like he looks so much younger here. This was an interesting event because nowadays Luke has actually gone back into that situation and talked about how the GTX 1080 Ti was actually a pretty manipulative launch.
But if I remember correctly, they didn't tell us stuff like the price and a few other like really key things that if you published an announcement video, you would really expect to have.
Which does seem a little scummy, but not really that weird as of yet. But things do start to get a little bit worse because quickly after that whole event, it's weird seeing all these people so much younger now. But here's Tim from Hardware Unbox, March 2018, Jesus. Not that long after. It is the Nvidia GeForce Partner Program. Could be bad news for us all. So basically what the GeForce Partner Program was, because it did get destroyed, Nvidia like completely canceled it because it was so anti-consumer and they're actually getting antitrust issues with it. Basically what this did was partner with companies, some for example like Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte, some other companies out there. Wikipedia says at least the program was regarded as an anti-consumer practice due to the fact that partnering companies were required to remove their gaming brand from all Nvidia graphics cards. They had to take off the gaming branding. They couldn't even brand a graphics card for gaming, even though it renders goddamn graphics.
Yeah, talk about scummy tactics. And also, this is just plain stupid. Who at Nvidia thought that this was a good idea? I hope they got fired.
Makes no sense whatsoever. So this was obviously pretty anti-competitive. Partners are allowed to work with other companies, not just Nvidia. So everybody pretty much saw this as a pretty negative thing, just like how Tim was talking about here way back in 2018. Now this has taken new forms.
Of course.
I think this is still somewhat a thing, maybe just not as aggressively in your face, but the Nvidia partner network now exists. Like say down here, like cloud partners, data center providers, distributors, a bunch of other companies that they partner with probably push their brand a little bit. We know that a lot of companies are scared of Nvidia because even though they partner with them, Nvidia holds a lot of the power.
Putting pressure on your partners, maintain pricing in the channel or whatever, it's part of the broader Nvidia behavior that puts their partners in a position of constant fear.
So this doesn't look great, but the GeForce Partner Program, at least it was a W because it did end up getting canceled in May 2018 because of how bad it actually was. But you can kind of see where Nvidia is starting to lean. They're trying to leverage their power to control the market and try to form a monopoly or something like that. Then we move to a new thing.
That's exactly
and this is Nvidia
planning.
RTX. I know you guys probably remember back in 2018 when they changed GTX to RTX because they're pushing ray tracing. Now, this was back when presentations were still pretty good for Nvidia. Like most of this presentation was talking about gaming and rendering ray tracing using DLSS upscaling. And as you can see, the like ratio is still pretty good on this. This was introducing ray tracing in DLSS, which does lead to a lot of problem as we see in the future. The first thing is how hard they were pushing ray tracing. Not that ray tracing is a bad thing. I think ray tracing is actually...
Ray tracing is fine. It looks great, but that was the entire selling point was ray tracing. That was all they were going for, nothing else. That was the problem. And the thing is, even people with a graphics card that can properly do ray tracing without, completely tanking the frame rate, most people don't use it. Even in games that support it, they just don't, because they don't care. I mean, it does look better, yeah, sure, but people just don't use it.
Pretty cool. Literally in the game, it casts rays to basically try to simulate light, like real life light inside of a video game. So you can see like reflections and stuff from around corners or anything perspective correct. It's gonna get realistic bounce lighting. So like if you had like a red wall or something, this would be real lighting like that inside of a game. This is where ray tracing or real-time ray tracing in games started to come around. I remember back when this happened, this was the video that I remember like really stuck out to me. Jay's 2 cents covered Battlefield 5 with RTX on. Now this is a weird situation because ray tracing only launched with like one freaking game. It only had ray traced reflections at the time. And what I think was really funny is how much performance you lost by playing on it. For example, here, this was without ray tracing on, he was getting 150 FPS. And then when he went on to like ultra ray tracing, he was in like the 30s, maybe 40.
Okay, I was wrong. It's way more than 50% of the FPS gone.
FPS. So not really great in terms of the performance, but ray tracing genuinely had some nice benefits. Like it looks cool. It's just extremely intensive to run. Obviously, we know today that Nvidia still pushes ray tracing extremely heavy, something they want to hold over AMD because AMD is further behind in ray tracing at the moment, even though the new cards are starting to look a little bit better with their ray tracing performance. But obviously Nvidia wants to push this because they get better performance with ray tracing. The graphics can look
yeah, okay. Here the FPS are actually worse on AMD. But before? Come on. Ah, it was wrong.
extremely heavy, something they want to hold over AMD because AMD is further behind in ray tracing at the moment, even though the new cards are starting to look a little bit better with the ray tracing
61
performance.
to
But obviously
44.
Nvidia wants to push this because they get better performance with ray tracing. The graphics can look better, although sometimes I actually think they can look worse. And that was really the big controversy with RTX when it launched. I mean, the GPUs themselves weren't very good value, and they introduced the RTX 20 series super cards, which started to look a little bit better. That was a situation with the rest of 20 series. That's where it really starts to compound a lot of those things, because when they introduced 30 series, there's a huge uplift in terms of their ray tracing performance.
Yep,
On the surface, 30 series looks pretty good. I mean, look at these performance numbers. The 3070 is beating a 2080 Super by quite a bit. 3080 is completely gapping the 2080 Super, and these aren't using any like weird performance hacks.
Yeah, but one of the problems back then still was, when I remember correctly, that there was still the mining frenzy going on, and graphics cards were far more expensive because the miners would just buy everything they can get, and then, you know, that would inflate the prices massively.
Like, you know, DLSS or frame generation like we kind of see today. Some manipulative things did start to take place because right off the bat, Nvidia did market this GPU to be able to game at 8K. 8K gaming on a 30.
8K gaming. You know, the thing that everyone does. This is ridiculous. Why would you even market it like that? Makes no sense. Ooh, it's 8K gaming. No one uses that. But then also the 3090 in general, almost no one uses it. That's, you know, high-end graphics card. The only people using it are, you know, people with a lot of money, number one. And number two, streamers, you know, professional gamers, professional gamers, and gamers that are well, have the money for it. So the normal, the average game enjoyer will not buy that graphics card. Way too expensive, especially not when you are playing esport games. Absolutely not necessary.
90, which was kind of cool, I guess. But Nvidia sponsored videos for here, like Linus, they did a sponsored video with 8K gaming, and also Marquez Brownlee. Technically speaking, the 3090 could play at 8K, but at the time, TVs and stuff were the only option you ever had to run 8K at all, and those TVs were like $30,000 or something. As time has gone on,
remember, I told you, that's only for people with a lot of money.
actually, companies are making less and less 8K displays because it is such a pointless thing to be able to run. 4K is like almost always sharp enough at any screen size. But this is another.
Personally, I think 4K is too sharp. I don't need to see every single pore on the skin of an actor in a movie or a show. I don't even want to see that. I would be far more, you know, comfortable not seeing that.
case of Nvidia sponsoring people, trying to push something that really didn't apply to that many people, trying to control the narrative going out. It's like, oh, only the Nvidia graphics card can do 8K gaming. What was really bad with the 30 series launch was actually things like this, because Hardware Unboxed, for example, obviously very, very stable, very good reviewer, and Nvidia bans Hardware Unboxed, then backpedals. So basically, Nvidia was trying to cut off samples or any review material for Hardware Unboxed. No place is entitled to get review samples or anything like that, but it's really the way that Nvidia went and did this, because we just talked about ray tracing and everything, how intensive it is. Nvidia was trying to say that Hardware Unboxed wasn't covering ray tracing heavily enough, that ray tracing was the future of gaming, and and Hardware Unboxed is like, people don't really use it. Nvidia was like, hey,
ray tracing kind of is the future of gaming, but it also kind of isn't, because it's, yes, it looks really, really nice, but is it an actual game changer? No. Geometry was a really, really big game changer back in the day when the first GeForce card came out. I remember that because Craig Free was using the GeForce card very well, getting like kind of double the frames of a non-GeForce graphics card, even compared to the TNT2, which was the predecessor card to the GeForce cards, and that's only that was only because of the way the graphics card was rendering geometry. That's how you got round stuff, round and partly round stuff look actually round and partly round. That was a game changer. That's why that tech is used in every graphics card that exists, in every single one now. Well, the tech got more advanced, of course, and everything got better. That's what I want to say, and that was a game changer, and that changed the game a lot towards Nvidia compared to ATI and Matrox and 3DFX, and that was a big deal. And that's why every graphics card after that was called GeForce from Nvidia until they stopped that a couple almost 10 years ago. Oh Jesus, I'm old. Yeah. Back to the video.
Need to cover this more, in Hardware Unboxed like, no, like we covered enough. We think it's useful to a certain point, but it isn't really the only thing to be talking about with these graphics cards. It's not an advertisement when you make a review, it's a freaking review. So this was an instance of Nvidia trying to shape the narrative and literally withhold samples from Hardware Unboxed. Obviously, Hardware Unboxed is based, they stand on business, and they didn't like get scared of this. Other people who weren't as confident in their kind of content maybe would have bent the knee to Nvidia and allowed them to shove it up the ass.
But if they want to play dirty and pull the crap they played in this email, they can just bugger off. We do not need them.
Hardware Unboxed like, no, if you don't want to send us samples, if you don't want to work with us because we're not fitting your editorial direction, we're just not going to work with you. This also led to people like Linus also responded to the Hardware Unboxed situation, and really this didn't look good for Nvidia. This was a huge PR disaster, and eventually Nvidia started working with Hardware Unboxed again, just being way less pushy, at least from what it seemed.
Yeah.
Try changing editorial direction with us, of all of the outlets, made us talk to other media outlets to learn about their experience of it. And we'll have some of that later in the week as well.
Oh, Jesus. I wonder what happened. More, controlling the narrative stuff? Maybe?
30 series was a good generation of graphics cards, but I'm going to show you something that probably is going to bring nightmares to you. It's going to be PTSD when you see this image.
Yeah.
Do you see that shit? Mining. Wait, let me scare you again. Boom. Ready for it? Boom. Another one. Crypto mining was a curse of the 30 series graphics card generation. Also a curse for AMD's graphics cards at the time as well. Crypto miners are
actually especially AMD, because they were better at mining. That's why you couldn't get any graphics card with the Navi chips. I think that were called Navi, yeah. And you couldn't get anything, and they were so expensive, like really expensive. You couldn't get anything. It was hell. Building a computer back then was hell. That's why my computer, which I still use, I configured that thing myself. I bought all the parts, but the graphics card I reused for my old machine, because buying a new graphics card, impossible. That would have been as expensive as building a completely new computer. Just a graphics card. That's insane. Now, of course, if I would have been a professional, no? And needed the performance of a high-end graphics card, of course I would have paid $1,000 for a graphics card, but I didn't need that, and I didn't have the money. And if you pay $1,000 for a graphics card, you really want that thing to be good, and it's really hard to argue that a graphics card is worth $1,000 unless you really need a graphics. It really does what you need it for. And just playing games isn't that. There are plenty of other graphics cards you can buy that are way cheaper and just play games with them.
Probably to blame for the graphics chip shortage, because at the time there was a huge boom in crypto, which I don't know who really actually uses crypto, to be honest. They wanted to take the opportunity.
No one uses crypto. Crypto is basically a scam. It's basically a scam. I've never heard anyone saying something about crypto, how to use it, that makes sense, unless you're just buying something.
To cash in. Now also was at a time when everybody is home for COVID. People actually wanted computers, so there's already a high demand for computer parts like graphics cards and that kind of stuff. And then crypto miners took this to a whole new level. So here is the price of Ethereum, which is a crypto coin. Who gives a shit? And then that shoots up to the moon. And as you can see, right along with it, GPU prices are also shooting to the moon. This is comparing the MSRPs of some of these graphics cards. So here's the Nvidea ones, 127, 149%, 171%. As we see over time, eventually there was a peak where Nvidia graphics cards were 304% of the MSRP. The only reason why this kind of worked out is because people had stimulus checks and they were just kind of spending some money on this kind of stuff, but this started to build some kind of resentment for it. And this has led to PTSD even to this day, where a bunch of people are still checking graphics cards at launch and everything to see how their pricing changes over time, because we don't want to be in the same situation. And this has even created a culture, because these crypto mining shortages were honestly, I think, the first time that graphics cards were legitimately scalped and resold to people at a much higher price. Today, we still see a lot of scalping going on with graphics cards. I remember when the 50 series launched, you couldn't get like a 5090 or anything like that, and people were already trying to sell them at like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the MSRP. There's even been anti-scalping movements where some people will go on there and they'll actually try to scalp out bots. So a bot will try to buy a graphics card on the market, selling that bot a piece of paper and labeling it a 5090 or something like that, so that people would get fooled, or the bots would get fooled into buying it and then get a piece of paper and be completely scammed and then not allow them to return it. It's actually caused trauma in the PC gaming community that there's now an anti-scalping movement. You could say that Nvidia, AMD, specifically talking about Nvidia here, but they're not really liable for what has happened here, because people just wanted graphics cards and they literally couldn't make enough because the capacity, the manufacturing capacity was actually limited at the time because of COVID. But Nvidia also did some things that seem pretty scummy in order to, what I think, to leverage the situation to make as much money as possible, while at the same time trying to virtue signal that they're on gamers' sides. For example here, Nvidia made the RTX 3080 Ti. This was a graphics card that was stupid. Like the original 3080 was a $700 graphics card, and the 3080 Ti was a like $1,200 graphics card. It really was only a little bit faster than a normal 3080. And it was clearly Nvidia trying to jack up the price to take advantage of people buying these graphics cards at much higher prices and getting scalped models as well. And Nvidia also, actually a little bit before the 3080 Ti did launch, they announced these LHR graphics card. It stands for low hash rate graphics cards, which are basically ones that were made in the factory to not be able to take advantage of crypto mining, or they're very bad at mining. This seemed like something that would be very pro-consumer, that Nvidia was looking at this and wanted to basically get graphics cards in the hands of gamers instead of in the hands of crypto miners. But at the same time though, a lot of people found many ways to bypass the low hash rate limitation and just get these graphics cards anyway. So this kind of just came off.
Funny thing, what he hasn't mentioned yet, I think it was Nvidia or AMD or kind of both, but not. There were graphics cards specifically manufactured for mining without any monitor outputs. I'm not sure if there were, specifically made chips from Nvidia or AMD, but I know there were graphics cards that were specifically made for mining purposes only. I remember that.
Off as this PR thing where Nvidia is trying to virtue signal that they're trying to get graphics cards to gamers. At least that's what it felt like. Now, I'm sure some people did buy these cards and appreciated they existed, but I don't think this was as effective as Nvidia maybe would have tried to make it out to be. This did obviously affect Nvidia. Their stock price went up a lot in this time. We're going to ignore the right side here because AI kind of went crazy and now Nvidia is worth trillions of dollars. But if we look just back at the beginning of 2020, when this crypto mining shortage started, to this point here in like 2022, they doubled in value from this time. They were very, very profitable off of this whole crypto shortage.
Well, yes.
It's hard to deny they weren't trying to take advantage of the situation.
And then
you can't really
hit.
blame them as a company when they have to make as much profit as possible. It is their fiduciary responsibility as a publicly traded company. At the same time, this doesn't really give us that much trust that they're really looking out for gamers. Then that leads us to, I'm gonna take a drink of my tea, RTX 40 series. I'm about to say 50 series. 50 series, that's given me trauma too because it's been so rough. Here's this comical picture of Jensen holding the 4090. It doesn't even look like you can hold this thing up because it's like 2 kilos, I'm pretty sure. I think it's pretty heavy.
Jesus Christ,
This especially
that's massive.
following the 30 series where everything was so overpriced and shortaged and really hard to buy anything if you even wanted to. So that's what we're coming off of contextually into the 40 series launch. But on the surface though, 40 series was actually pretty decent, at least when you look at the 4090. Now we're going to talk about the other cards that were introduced at the beginning here too. But the 4090 looked pretty good, stacked up really well against the 3090. Actually, huge improvement, like 60% faster on average. But then if you actually go to Nvidia's website here, or even during the Nvidia presentation, if you scroll all the way down where they actually introduce the graphics cards, here's the 4090, here is the 4080. And now it's the 4080 16 gigabyte starting at $1,200, and then the 12 gigabyte model of the 4080 starting at $900. And that card was instantly sought out to be pretty mediocre, because when you break down the specs of the 4080 12 gigabyte, it literally looked like a 60 class card, but being charged $900. Nvidia unlaunched the 12 gigabyte 4080. Like, this card didn't even come out. It didn't end up existing in that name that it's currently placed at. But it's not that it didn't come out. The 4070 Ti.
How bad did it have to get that they unlaunched a graphics card? That had to be massive. To be fair, I haven't looked at new graphics cards in 2 years now. So I didn't get anything of that from here, right? But this had to be massive. Like massive. Why didn't I hear about that at all?
actually became the 4080 12GB, and it came out about a month later than it was originally supposed to. The 4070 Ti was not really liked at all. Now with the launch of 40 series, some other stuff really did break out. EVGA, for example, a long-term, very loyal partner for Nvidia, ended up leaving them and just didn't, like, they never wanted to make graphics cards ever again. And this isn't a...
They could have just made AMD graphics cards and Intel. I mean, sure, you sell less, but you still make money.
surprise, because Nvidia is very, very pushy with their partners.
Undue pressure on their board partners to meet MSRP targets, not sustainable for their business. They put extremely restrictive guidelines in place for their board partners in terms of the types of products they could build in order to differentiate their own brand.
So EVGA was just one that ended up pulling out, but this isn't anything special for many other partners. Like, they feel this pressure too. See, Nvidia has their grubby mitts like clamped down, trying to control all their partners, saying what they can, they can't make, what they can advertise on the boxes, what they can make them look like, which is so weird because it's kind of like behaving like a company that should be more like they make their own cards. They have their Founders Edition cards, but they're not sold in huge volumes, so it doesn't really make sense for those. But they're operating like a company that doesn't have partners. But also, every single graphics card launch in 40 series, I don't know if there's a single one that was actually like positive. We maybe had one, like count 'em, one that was decent. Okay, so here, the 4070 Ti, not that great. We obviously talked about that. The 4080 was also rough, like the 16GB one. But also you see some reviews on RTX 4070. The 4070 was maybe the most okay graphics card, at least at launch. They did make a super series as well. There's also the 4060 Ti, which is pretty universally hated. I even called the 16GB version back then the worst graphics card ever made, or the worst GPU ever made. And that's because of how expensive it was for basically a 50 class card, but it was $500. And this made the situation where there's an 8GB version of the 4060 Ti and there's a 16GB version of the 4060 Ti. And there's a...
Why do both of them make what? Why does that exist? Just have one version. You should only have one version. This is stupid. This is bloat. Stop this.
A lot of differences between those, but they have the exact same name on the box and stuff, so it's hard to tell. And what this does is trick a lot of people that aren't as educated in the situation and don't know which graphics card would be okay for them. So they end up getting goofed and gaffed and getting the cheaper one, which is the 8GB card, which they're going to want to upgrade later, or that 8GB card will get thrown into a pre-built PC and then somebody will get screwed over by that card later in time. But Nvidia, even today with 50 series, as this has come out, is doing the exact same thing with the 5060 Ti. Not a great look. There's an 8GB version and a 16GB version. AMD is doing the same thing with the 9060 XT as well. I don't really like that either. That doesn't even mention the RTX 4060, the entry point into getting a graphics card at all from Nvidia from their current generation of 40 series. When it was 40 series, now it's 50 series. That was $300 to get a 4060 card. And when you actually look at the GPU die and stuff, it looks like a 50 class card. It is so small. It doesn't look like it's worth $300. I made a video about this. People obviously latched on to 1.3 million views. People have been watching this. But the 40 series GPUs weren't just rough from a value standpoint, like literally how much performance they're giving you for your dollar. Well, Nvidia also, this is where they really started to fudge the results on a lot of their GPUs and everything. They started to mislead consumers by advertising what I'd say false advertisement. So here they say the RTX 40 series up to 4 times faster, powered by 3rd gen RTX architecture and Nvidia DLSS 3.
Yeah, it turned out that the more frames came all from AI. Literally. All AI generated, they aren't actually that much faster. That was something even I heard of out of that. Yeah, that was bad.
And DLSS 3 introduced frame generation. Multiply your performance with AI. And this down here, it gives you some of the actual settings that they're using. 4K resolution, highest game settings, DLSS super resolution performance modes, this is actually rendering at 1080p. Frame generation on the 4090. So this is the 4090 performance. As you see, it's saying that, oh, against like a 3090 or whatever the heck they're performing it or comparing it to. They're using frame generation, which doesn't actually render new frames. It just takes like 2 real frames in a game and then tries to interpolate the difference between the 2 frames, but it doesn't actually result in more performance because the latency of that, because it has to wait to hold the newest frame.
Yeah.
This was kind of the start of Nvidia starting to bullshit this kind of stuff. Now, this isn't to say that frame generation or DLSS super resolution can't be some like good technologies.
I would say it's fine to use with slow games. Like maybe in tower defense, tower dominion. It's a tower defense game. I have it, played it a lot, already over 100 hours, and that game, if you are playing up into endless mode, going to high wave numbers, the frame rate is kind of dying. There, the AI stuff here might be good, might be actually useful. But in fast games, no, I don't think so at all.
They actually have some merit to them. It's really the advertisement that makes it feel pretty fake, like fake frames. When they advertise some things like the RTX 5060 or the 5070, they said a 5070 is as fast as a 4090, which is just not true whatsoever. But let's hop into game real quick and see the issues with like the 5060. I just loaded up Doom the Dark Ages. I don't know why the screen is kind of like locked over to the left side there. And I'm on the RTX 5060 right now. So let's go ahead and just do like ultra settings or something like that. Obviously some issues right away. We're at 1440p, and in 2025 you can't play at native ultra settings on a 5060. I would have thought.
Once in Volcom, where are the frames? Am I blind? Wait, is that the frames? The 39?
Would have been a mainstream resolution and graphics card for this time, but that's not what's happened at all. Nvidia advertises
FPS,
some things in this game,
below
say
50.
like frame generation. Here we can switch it to DLSS. Now, if we wanted to maintain at native resolution, we'll set it to DLAA. That's native DLSS, basically. Just off the rip, enabling
15
DLAA.
FPS. This is like how I played Quake 3 on my 3DFX Voodoo 1 card. That's the frame rates I had, and if it got even lower, below
So
10.
now we're at 15 FPS. We're at like 40 something before. If we want to make this a little bit more playable on the 5060, but if we switch it down to quality, which renders the game more at 1080p and upscales it to 1440p, even with upscaling, it can still struggle to run Doom the Dark Ages at 1440p. So at high settings, we can get in the mid 40s with upscaling on the 5060. The big thing to notice on the left side of the screen is the latency measure. That is basically saying how long does it take your game to run after you move your mouse or move your keyboard or whatever the hell you're doing in the game. I'm not going to judge you, but it's about 40 milliseconds right now. Nvidia advertises frame generation. 50 series, you can now go from ×3 or ×4, whereas they artificially limited 40 series from not being able to do frame generation ×3 ×4, it seems like. Nvidia claims that 50 series has hardware that is specifically makes this even possible to run ×3 or ×4.
I'm not so sure if I can believe that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's just a lie. But I don't know. It might be, but I don't know.
Play engine was improved to leverage flip metering when generating multiple frames, ensuring that the GPU delivers consistent and optimal frame pacing.
But what's interesting is on 40 series cards with frame generation, it also was artificially, it seems like, limited to 40 series graphics cards. And Nvidia claimed that there was an optical flow accelerator in it that they needed to do frame generation on 40 series cards that 30 series or 20 series didn't have access to. But what's funny is when 50 series came out, they actually updated the model for frame generation, which meant that it didn't even require the optical flow accelerator anymore. Instead, it just uses 2 AI engines. Basically, Nvidia subtly made it available on all RTX graphics cards as long as they have enough AI performance, but they're clearly not going to make that backwards compatible. Here is DLSS frame gen on a 5060. And here's 2x mode. You know, we're at about 45 FPS. You'd expect if you get 2x the FPS, they'd be getting like close to 90, maybe like 80 if there's some loss, right? Isn't that funny? Our frame rate, by turning on frame gen, actually decreased.
How? Why? Nvidia, why? Why are you doing this? And yes, this is a Nvidia problem. 100%. This is incredible. How can you fuck up so much? I don't know what to say. Guess I'm gonna still buy AMD graphics cards. At least I don't get shit like that. Wow. It's incredible. This is really incredible.
How the hell does that work? We were at 45 FPS before, and now we're at about 30. And our latency is actually almost 10, no, it's more than 10 milliseconds higher. So frame generation obviously adds some latency, and because of the load on the GPU, it can actually give you worse frame rate sometimes. Now let's try 4x mode. Maybe we can overcome this issue if we turn on 4x. Again, 4x frame generation. And our frame rate is still below what we're at native. And our latency is even higher than we were at native. So why the hell is this happening? You'd think you'd be getting 4x the frame rate. No, that's bullshit. Because a lot of the situations that can happen on these lower tier NVIDIA graphics cards is they're so limited on VRAM. For example, the 5060 only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and all of these new NVIDIA features, frame generation, ray tracing, they require more VRAM on the GPU. So even though you might be buying it for the advertising of getting a 4x the frame rate or anything like that, you might not have enough VRAM to take advantage of it. You might not be able to take advantage of the ray tracing features that NVIDIA advertises so much on their graphics cards. Very scummy situation, and there's very little opportunity where you can actually make this work. And even because this is using the frame generation and it's using the upscaling, which both utilize the AI tensor cores on the GPU, sometimes the AI performance of like a 5060, if it doesn't have enough AI performance, it also can't keep up with all these engines trying to run all these AI models on them and trying to, you know, make all those features that NVIDIA talks about so much on their GPUs. Now we can try to make this work. If we go ahead and take this down to performance upscaling, let's see if now with such a low resolution of being 720p upscaled to 1440p, can we make this work? And it seems like frame generation is kicking in. Now we're getting over 100 FPS. But our latency, though, not that great. And when I move my mouse, it does not feel very responsive. But it doesn't look
because of the latency.
And I can maybe get used to playing it on this. This is the type.
No, this is, like I said, you can use that for Tower Dominion, but not for games where you have to move fast.
Type of things that you'll run into with multi-frame generation. So really, it's an interesting situation where NVIDIA is limiting these features to really only be effective on their higher tier graphics cards, which I would say like a 5070 Ti. So the gaming innovation, it's not like it's not there. I think NVIDIA's GeForce team is actually doing quite a bit of cool things, like with their cooler models, those look freaking sick. I think even frame generation, upscaling, and ray tracing can be really cool technologies, but they're not being advertised or marketed in a way that matters because it seems like NVIDIA knows these graphics cards aren't that strong, so they're going to advertise something that makes headlines. The next moment in AI is here. And this shift, I think, really started with 40 series, or even 50 series, I guess. This is my live stream where I streamed the announcement of the actual 50 series event. And as you see, we watched the whole presentation and we saw 200 AI counters, or over 200, I'm pretty sure, AI counters of how many times they said AI during the presentation. Maybe we should start a gaming counter too, because if he says gaming, maybe we'll get about 3 in the entire presentation. That might be a record. NVIDIA's in a situation where it doesn't seem like they even care about gaming. There's been so much shit going on, but one of the biggest things is the pricing and availability of 50 series cards. And this might be because NVIDIA is allocating a lot of the things that they have to sell actually towards AI and not towards gamers. So we see things like this, which I think Linus had some issues with this because the 5090 gold PC, it's a freaking gold graphics card, is $800. We're seeing the price 800. That'd be amazing.
Why does this exist? Why would you buy a graphics card made out of gold anyway? Why? Why? If you have the money to buy something like that, I don't think you would buy something like that. Because you would know better than to buy something like that.
$8,000, add a zero to that for a consumer graphics card. The prices are getting out of hand. Like this is a boutique product, but at the same time, this doesn't lead to the entire market getting any better because of it. And we see a lot of these prices extend into the actual market itself. We see 5090s, which are already ridiculously expensive to start. $2,000 for a consumer graphics card is insane. You know, it doesn't even go for $2,000. It's mostly more like a $3,000 graphics card. We get down to like the 5080, $1,200. This card is supposed to be $1,000. The 5080 is well over that price point. The 5070 Ti.
For someone like me, you know, I'm streaming, doing YouTube. It would be better for me to buy a second computer, one for gaming and doing the stuff, and the other one for the streaming. That would be less expensive and safer, better quality overall. I think that would be cheaper than buying one graphics card. What is this? This is insanity.
Well over $750 that it's supposed to cost. $900 regularly, it's like $900. Even the 5070, $605, even though it's supposed to be a $500 graphics card. There's also the 5060 Ti. It's supposed to be a $380 card. It's $420, $430. Now you could blame tariffs and stuff like that, but apparently right now tariffs are actually paused. So I don't know what's actually happening. They did get these shipments before that pause on the tariffs. So pricing availability, not great on these 50 series cards. It leads to a lot of people just not being able to buy them, even though they might want to buy them, because at MSRPs of these 50 series cards, they actually look pretty okay. Then Nvidia also with 50 series had a lot of other issues. It's like, why are they still trying to push this 12 volt high power connector? There's also other issues like with the missing ROPs. Nvidia GPUs with this generation, there's been less quality control. Nvidia is focusing on them less, and that means that some of the GPUs were actually defective from the factory and they were missing some of the ROPs. Then also Nvidia quietly with the 50 series just said, hey, we're going to cancel out PhysX support. They still use PhysX today, and Nvidia now uses it in their Omniverse technology and that kind of stuff. Now on 50 series cards, it does not work, the 32-bit version of it. So it seems like every single launch with Nvidia, there's either some kind of narrative they're trying to push, there's issues with the launch itself, like that's just not available, it's too expensive, they're clearly trying to take advantage of and trying to profit on a situation, or they're trying to manipulate reviewers and just pushing a certain narrative, and reviewers are trying to work in the best interest of the people, the consumer. Like that's what try to fucking do. Try to make educational, good, informative content for people. And Nvidia, honestly, over time, just been snowballing into this very, very like bad faith company. They're clearly not even trying to focus on gaming. The people who built up Nvidia to where they are today. This is why so many content creators or anybody really just does not like Nvidia. There's not a whole lot to like. There's maybe a couple things, like I like the upscaling.
Well, it's a company. You should never trust a company. No, you can trust people inside of a company if you have, worked with them for enough time that you get to know them kind of, and there's a trust build up between you and them. That yes, but you can never trust a company.
Every now and then we get a GPU launch that's kind of okay. The only way to really correct the situation, in my opinion, is if their competition like AMD or something like that, or even Intel, can make a very competitive product that a lot of people buy, and that puts actual pressure on Nvidia to change, become more pro-consumer, and actually prioritize the gaming market if they are still like worried about trying to maintain dominance in this field. I just want to talk about this, the Nvidia situation, like how have they ended up where they are, and why is like everything surrounding them seems so freaking negative today. Every time if you buy a product from Nvidia, even if you feel like you're forced to buy it, it might be very expensive. You're actually feeding into their model, their business model. That's exactly what they want you to do. They want you to feel that pressure to like, oh, I have to get it because I don't really have another choice. You're doing exactly what Nvidia wants. Now, I'm not telling you to go buy a certain graphics card. Buy whatever is best for you. At the end of the day, Steve and Steve were talking.
Don't think people should just like kickstart Intel Arc or buy Radeon only because they don't like Nvidia or something. I mean, if you want to do it that way, great, but is not the consumer's responsibility to build the other two competitors?
Absolutely, yeah. You've got to buy what the best value product is for you.
Yeah.
In a lot of instances in the past, that legitimately has been Nvidia.
Yeah.
Hey, at the end of the day, it's not the consumer's like.
To be fair, yes, that's right. But also, if you absolutely don't like the politics and behavior of a company, you can just, boycott them for yourself. Just don't buy their products. That's what I do with Nestle, as good as I can. Which is hard because I don't know which brands are all owned by Nestle. That's a problem. That's also, M&M's owned by Nestle. Don't buy them anymore.
Fault, or it's not the consumer's job to keep a company in line. It should be competition that keeps companies in line, because consumers just consume. We buy products, we buy the best products for us, and companies should be trying to compete to earn that best spot. Don't go out there and say like vote with your wallet. It has to be AMD makes such a good product that people would genuinely go out and want to buy that one instead. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and you're probably gonna argue on it.
The thing is, AMD was known for making basically the best mid-range cards. Mid-range and beginner cards. They had problems in the high-end tiers, but these problems are basically gone now. They're as far as I know, they are really their newer chip generations are really good compared to what they had before. I mean, easy. They're almost as good as Ryzen processors. That's my opinion. Personal opinion time.
Probably gonna get a little hate for saying that, but let me know what you think. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video, probably also about Nvidia. I think I'm gonna do one on the 5060. So, all right, peace.
Good video.